All right. All right. Well, first of all, welcome everyone. My name is Andrea McAvoy. I'm the Director of Client Services here at Berkeley's Office of Intellectual Property and Industry Research Alliances. Thank you for joining us today for our SBIR STTR grant funding small business research subcontracts. This is the last session of IPRA's webinars for the spring. So check our website for those that we're going to be offering in the fall. We'll put the dates up sometime this summer. Deborah Summers, who is IPRA's Marketing Communications Director, is with us also, and she'll be adding links to the chat during this session. Following this webinar, you'll receive an email from her providing many of the links and resources that are discussed today. If you're a UC Berkeley faculty or researcher preparing for a promotion or tenure conversation, you may be interested in requesting IPRA's Innovation and Entrepreneurship Report. Entrepreneurship Activities Report for faculty and researchers. This report provides information about an individual's I&E activities, which are tracked by our peer division, the Office of Technology Licensing, and the Industry Alliances Office. Faculty and researchers can learn more and request a report by visiting IPRA's website. Today, we are hearing from Kate Lewis, who's the Associate Director of IPRA's Industry Alliances Office. Also joining us is Lale Shayeste, who's the Director of Intellectual Property and Administration. Feel free to type your questions into the chat as we go along or unmute yourself during the Q&A. This is an interactive session. It is also being recorded and will be available on IPRA's YouTube channel, probably starting sometime next week. If you have questions or a topic that you'd like to remain confidential, please wait until we stop recording to ask questions. Also, a brief survey will appear as you sign off today. And if you could please take a minute and fill it out, it helps us identify future topics. To get us started, I'm going to be posting a short 2-question survey that helps us identify who's in the room and what your experience is working with IPRA. All right. Yeah, some people are still taking it, so I'll give it another second. Okay. Thank you very much. I will share the results of that poll for you. And Kate, can you see who's in the room?
Yep.
All right, great. Then with that, it's all yours.
Okay. So can everybody see my screen? Let's see, just going to rearrange a little bit. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Lewis. Thank you for the introduction, Andrea. Today, we're going to talk about SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, and STTR, Small Business Tech Transfer grant funding. So just a quick blurb about IPRA. We're the Intellectual Property and Industry Research Alliance's office. We're made up of 2 offices, the Office of Technology Licensing. Lale is here as the Director of OTL, and I'm here representing the Industry Alliances office. And we work together to establish multifaceted contractual relationships with companies, with for-profit companies primarily, to enable research, commercialization, licensing, and innovative partnerships. To find out more, our link is on the slide and you can follow that. So first, we're going to talk about what SBIR and STTR grants are. So like I said before, the SBIR grants are the Small Business Innovation Research Grants, and STTR grants are Small Business Technology Transfer Grants. Both are highly competitive programs that encourage domestic small businesses to engage in federal research or federal R&D, research and development, with the potential for commercialization. They both are targeted towards small businesses, for profits, and And really the main focus is on commercializing technologies and having a commercial plan. The mission of the SBIR and STTR programs is to support scientific excellence and technological innovation through the investment of federal dollars, federal research funds, in critical American priorities to build a strong national economy. It's organized into 3 phases. Phase 1 is really to establish the technical merit, the feasibility, and commercial potential of the proposed research and development efforts. And it's also to determine the quality of the performance of that team, and the small business as an organization prior to providing more federal support. Phase 1 general awards are generally in the 50 to 250K, 305K, and typically can be for 6 months for SBIRs or up to a year for STTRs. Phase 2, the objective of Phase 2 is to continue the research and development efforts that were initiated in Phase 1. In order to qualify, really funding is based on the results that you achieve in Phase 1 or that the SBIR company achieved in Phase 1 and the scientific and technical merit and commercial potential of the project. Typically, only Phase 1 awardees are eligible. That's not true for all agencies, though. And Phase 2 awards are generally 750K to up to 1.8 million over 2 years. Some agencies like NIH have the opportunity to do a direct to Phase 2 SBIR award. And that means that the technology is developed enough that that they would go on a fast track to a Phase 2 award. So depending on the agency, that is a possibility. Phase 3, if it's applicable, is basically where the small business pursues commercialization resulting from Phase 1s and 2s, except that they're no longer funded by the federal government. So they're not funded by SBIR and STTR programs. They can be funded by the federal government under procurement contracts or as a defense contractor. And they may also be funded through private funds, venture capital funds, seed funding, that kind of thing. So in order to be required under statute to have an SBIR and STTR program, federal agencies with an extramural budget for research and development that exceeds $100 million are required to allocate about 3.2%, that's since FY17, to the SBIR program. Federal agencies with R&D budgets that exceed $1 billion are required to reserve 0.45% since FY16 to the STTR program. That's an addition. Currently, 11 federal agencies participate in SBIR programs, and 5 of those also participate in the STTR program. I did forget to mention in the beginning that please feel free to ask questions throughout. You can post them in the chat. You can post them to everyone or just to me. I have it open here on my screen. And also, if you want to raise your hand, feel free to do that and ask questions throughout. And as Andrea said, after we're finished with the formal presentation, we'll stop recording and we'll also have time for questions that we won't record and post. So feel free to wait also if you'd like. For SBIR and STTR eligibility, like I mentioned previously, you have to be an organized for-profit company with a place of business located in the United States. That means that UC Berkeley, as an institution of higher ed and a nonprofit, is not eligible to directly apply to an SBIR or STTR program. However, we can be a sub-awardee. See, I have a question. What's the difference between SBIR and STTR? So we're going to talk about that. So we'll get to that. For SBIR STTR eligibility, it has to be more than 50% owned and controlled by one or more individuals that are citizens or permanent residents of the US. And then it can have no more than 500 employees, and that includes affiliates. Let me get back to this screen. So another criteria, it has to be more than 50% of the salary has to be paid by the small business. So in order to be a PI on an SBIR, more than 50% of your salary has to be paid through the small business. What that means is if you're faculty or if you're staff or something like that, and you want to have a startup on the side and do an SBIR grant through the startup, then and you want to be PI on that, then more than 50% of your salary has to come from that startup through these funds. And that means you can't work 100% at the university. So that's what that piece means. Um, in terms of scoring, what the agencies are looking for, the significance, they're looking for innovation, they're looking at the team, like we mentioned before, your approach, and you really have to show that you have a desire to commercialize your research and development and are looking to develop a viable product. These are not basic research grants, they're not just exploratory, they're really looking for an idea where you have commercialization option. So here's the key differences between the SBIR and STTR programs. For SBIRs, you're permitted to partner with a nonprofit organization, but you're not required. However, for STTRs, it's required that you partner with a nonprofit research organization. That can be a university, that can be a national lab, or that can be another type of nonprofit. The small business must perform at least 40%, and the research partner must perform at least 30%. And the point of the STTR program is really to bridge the gap between the bench research, what's happening in the lab at the university, and then the commercialization of invention. So they're really trying to take the technology and transfer it out of the university and develop it under these programs. So in terms of process steps before an agreement gets issued for an STTR, the small business and the university must sign an intellectual property agreement. It's also called an allocation of rights agreement that basically talks about and they agree upon the disposition of intellectual property that's going to happen during the performance of the project. So that's a requirement only for STTRs and not for SBIRs. So the last time I did this talk in the fall, the appropriations had lapsed September 30th of 2025. And so we had a bunch of slides talking about all the different possibilities. Would the program even be continued? If it is continued, would it look the same? There was several different options that we went over and several different ideas that were being discussed and debated at the time. And so we've been waiting and talking among our teams, like, should we have this course? Is the SBIR, STTR program going to exist? We don't know. And so last month, Congress passed the appropriations, and then just this Monday, a few days ago, it was signed into law. And that basically has concluded more than a 6-month lapse in these SBIR and STTR programs, during which time there have been, there's not been, we've still been working with agencies who had gotten their awards before September 30th, but there's been a bit of a lull. There has not been any new awards that have been awarded. We have submitted some proposals, so I'm curious to see kind of what the process is going to be as these pick up back again. And this is called the Small Business Innovation and Economic Security Act. It restores these programs, SBIR and STTR, through September 30th of 2031. And it also introduces several changes that are aimed at accelerating the transition of federally funded technologies into operational use, hoping to strengthen the safeguards against foreign technology transfer and also improving the efficiency of these programs and the administration of them. So the first significant change is the creation of strategic breakthrough awards. These awards are intended to bridge the gap between phase 2 research and the transition to commercialization, where often even promising technologies struggle or fail. As we've been discussing, phase 1 awards, they establish the technical merit, feasibility, and commercial potential, and phase 2 support further R&D efforts. And under phase 3, small businesses typically are pursuing commercialization objectives or going into like a government procurement type of arrangement. And that's all been funded outside of the SBIR, STTR programs. Strategic breakthrough awards are aiming to bridge this gap. So basically what this means is federal agencies with more than $100 million in annual SBIR obligations may allocate up to 0.5% of their extramural research and development budgets to support these awards. Some interesting facts about them. They require 100% matching from non-SBIR funds, and that could be private funds, it could be other federal funds, venture capital, all of that. I don't know if I have the amount, they can be up to $30 million. And the downside is that the funds come from the same buckets. So basically, we talked about the percentage of the R&D budgets that are allocated to the SBIRs and STTR programs. So if they are awarding these strategic breakthrough awards, that could lower the amount of other awards or other funds that are available for other SBIR and STTR awards. The second is enhanced national security and foreign risk assessments or requirements. This is going to feel familiar to any faculty and staff on campus that already have federal funding. We've definitely increased due diligence requirements and foreign influence reporting. Basically, these new requirements aim to formalize that due diligence that many agencies have already implemented as part of a broader effort to address risks associated with foreign technology transfers. Basically, right now, before this act was signed, companies and small businesses already have to go through a process, a due diligence process, to disclose any foreign influence. And now that is going to extend to universities as well. That covers basically any university partners, individual researchers. And what this means just on the ground is that the reviews will likely take longer for these SBIR and STTR proposals and the foreign influence requirements, that any international collaborations may trigger more scrutiny, and that the IP and partnership structures must be clear. The third is proposal submission gaps. This is also very major change in this act. Beginning in fiscal year 2027, each participating agency must establish proposal submission caps. Agencies do retain the discretion on how those limits are structured, and they may be set on a per fiscal year basis or per solicitation basis or a per topic basis or technical topic basis. And really what it aims is to prevent small businesses from becoming SBIR mills. What that means is basically companies that heavily rely on federal contracts and grants. There are companies that some of their primary funding model is SBIR and STTR contracts and grants. However, under this requirement, agencies are permitted to grant waivers to those submission limits under certain circumstances. And according to some sources, this shift makes the university connection really, really more critical than ever, as an academic partner like UC Berkeley can help to bolster the scientific rigor and infrastructure credibility of that proposal. And so, if a small business is now limited on how many proposals they can submit per year, then it may increase their chance of getting awarded if they are partnering with a place like UC Berkeley. And then the fourth one that I have here is expanded technical and business assistance funding. And so basically the reauthorization also expands the type of technical and business assistance that SBIR and STTR recipients may obtain using program funds. Historically, these award funds could be used for legal, business management, or technical assistance. And under this new allocation, they can now be used in a limited capacity for cybersecurity assistance and screening for potential foreign involvement in technology development or in commercialization activities. Under this phase one, recipients can use up to $6,500 per project for technical and business assistance, while phase two can use up to $50,000 per project. I see there's in the chat question. So there's a question about raising money and basically giving away 10% of the company, does that count toward the percentage or not? I would encourage you to reach out to the federal agencies. I'm not sure if that counts toward the percentage or not. It does say 50% plus for US residents, and then also for ownership and also location. So I would reach out for specific questions like that. On this next slide, I wanted to go over some of our resources and some of our, where you can find some of our information. So yes, we can send the links in the chat. Andrea or Deborah, yes, thank you. We have a public list of all SBIR and STTR companies. It's published by the federal government. And we also have in the second bullet a link to our Begin website. It's a great place for you to find entrepreneurship and startup resources, and it's begin.berkeley.edu. We also have a list of companies on our own website, on the SBIR website, that have been founded to commercialize UC Berkeley IP that have also received SBIR or STTR grants. And then finally, the second to last bullet is if you're interested in finding solicitations, funding deadlines, all of that, then you can follow that link. This bottom link is a call out specifically to Berkeley faculty and researchers. We, on occasion, quite a bit actually get small businesses that reach out to our office and are interested in finding a faculty partner or a researcher to be able to partner with on their SBIR or STTR proposal. So if you're interested, we are collecting a list of faculty, and basically if a company reaches out to us and says, hey, we're interested in X field, and we look on our list and you are working in X field, and we'll reach out to you and see if you're interested. And if you are, we can make a connection. So if you'd like to, you can add your name and email to the chat, or email me or Deborah or Andrea, and we can get you added to a list that we can reference when we get companies reaching out to us. I also wanted to give a shout out to the NSF I-Corps program at UC Berkeley. And I'm going to put this link in the chat also. So that is the application link. You can see it says apply here. So that's what that link is that I put in. So NSF I-Corps is offered each month. It teaches teams to identify and refine their customer agreements and value propositions, to quickly assess commercial interest and feasibility, and to validate product market fit. Outside of the 3 remote evening class sessions, teams invest 30 to 35 hours conducting 20 interviews with potential customers as part of their customer discovery process. And teams who compete in the NSF I-Corps program have a significantly higher rate of securing an NSF SBIR or STTR grant or contract. A team of at least 2 teammates is required, which could include faculty, students, researchers, or founders. And so there's information on this slide. The next course is in May. We have online sessions May 18, 21, and 28. And then the application deadline is coming up. The tech scout, Dave, his email is there. So if you have information, please reach out directly to Dave. He is a tech scout, and NSF just created this new role, tech scout. And so Dave actually helps to source and support UC Berkeley's most promising I-Corps teams to help them into the pipeline and into other NSF opportunities such as the SBIR and STTR. So reach out to Dave if you are interested in getting more information. Okay, I next wanted to go into some UC Berkeley guidance. So this is really directed at if you are interested in participating as a sub-awardee or subcontractor on an SBIR contract or STTR contractor grant. So in this, UC Berkeley, as we talked about, can only be a sub-awardee. We cannot be the prime awardee because we're not a for-profit business. In order to be a PI at UC Berkeley, you have to have PI status or PI status by exception. And importantly, you can serve as the UC Berkeley PI or the subcontractor PI, but you cannot serve as the main PI. There are some solicitations where the agency itself allows The research institute's PI to serve as the main PI, but our campus policies do not allow that. That would be a conflict of interest. Really using university resources should be for the benefit of the university, not for the benefit of for-profit companies. So we would want to make sure that while you can be PI at Berkeley, you cannot be PI of the whole thing. So I would say that if you're working as a subcontractor, under our conflict of commitment policy, you can get approval to go be PI at the subcontract or at the small business. That's a separate process, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're really talking about when there's a subcontract at the university. In addition, we'd want to make sure that the scope of work that the campus is doing, that your lab is doing, is very clearly defined. We want to make sure that we know and are able to differentiate what the small business is doing and then what your role as a subcontractor, what you're doing. And these are going to be very similar as other federal proposals. We need to make sure you're disclosing any financial conflicts of interest at the proposal stage. That is both for the state of California 700U, as well as any agency-specific requirements, like the PHS or NSF, DOE, any of the other specific requirements. You need to make sure that everything is disclosed at the proposal stage. This next bullet, if you're working with a defense agency, primarily those are funded as federal contracts, which can be much more difficult both at the proposal stage and at the award stage. And so we ask if you know that you're going to be proposing with a small business to get your proposal in as soon as possible, because we need to do a lot more review of the solicitation and make sure that there are not requirements we need to address at the proposal stage. And then also in the proposal stage, let us know if there's been any UC Berkeley IP that's been licensed from your lab to that small business, because it's going to help us as we do the review and also as we're working on the allocation of rights later, and as we move forward with the award. So there's a question in the chat. Do we have to have started a business to apply for SBIR? Can academic labs apply alone, or do they need a business? So in order to qualify for this program, it needs to be a small business that's a for-profit and that has under 500 employees, and that's 50% plus owned by a U.S. citizen or national. What that means is that UC Berkeley cannot apply directly. We can only be a subcontractor on these SBIR and STTR awards. So in order to apply, it has to be a separate small business and a separate business entity. I wanted to just quickly include a grant life cycle chart. You may have seen this on different websites, but basically talking through what the grant life cycle is. The grant life cycle for SBIRs and STTRs is the same as others. Basically, at the pre-award stage, you will be working with a small business to define the project, to decide which agencies you're interested in applying for, which topics, and then the proposal submission process will be the same. It goes through Phoebe. It's reviewed by the Industry Alliance's office. We'll review your statement of work, look at your budget that your research administrator will help you with, and then we'll help you to submit the proposal to the small business. Once it's submitted, we'll also help with any requirements that happen between proposal submission and award issuance, like the allocation of rights or IP agreement that we talked about that's required for STTRs. So we'll work with you and with the small business to get all those requirements met, and then we'll negotiate the award with the small business. Anything that's in the in the prime award contract will flow down to us, and so we'll talk a little bit more about federal contracts in a bit, but we may need to negotiate the terms and conditions, including in some cases needing to go back, having the small business go back to the federal agency to make sure that the terms are appropriate for a university, such as publication rights. And then you'll be managing the award in the same way with your research administrator, and then publication. So a few important things to keep in mind. These SBIR and STTR subcontracts incur full indirect costs. We do not offer discounts. We do not offer lower indirect cost rates. And that's just basically it. So these are federal funds. We cannot offer any breaks on indirect costs. In terms of signing agreements, who can sign? These are the same as any other contractor grant. So the lab, PIs, researchers do not have, even deans or chairs do not have authority to sign any agreements, and that includes the allocation of rights or IP management agreements or the subcontracts themselves. And so just make sure that, as you're thinking about working with a small business, you work with your research administrator to get the proposal into Phoebe, into the Industry Alliance's office. And then we can work with you and the small business on getting everything set up and signed. Also to keep in mind UC's patent policy. What are your obligations? As an employee of the University of California, you are required to assign any patent rights of anything that you're creating to the university. And so sometimes small businesses, especially if they've not worked with universities, will think that any work that the university is doing, we will give to them or assign to them, or that they own all the results or they own the intellectual property that comes out of these projects. That's not something we can agree to. You assign your patent rights to the University of California, and we, as the UC, own anything that is created or made under these projects, and then we can offer the small business a right to negotiate a license for that intellectual property. The proposal submission and award timelines are the same as any of your other contracts and grants or proposals. We need the proposals in at least 4 days before. Like I said before, I just briefly mentioned, if you know that you're working with a defense agency, like the Air Force research labs or anything like that, make sure if you can to get those in as soon as possible so that we have more time to review all the paperwork and just make sure there's not things that we need to address in the proposal. Another thing to keep in mind is a lot of these small businesses, sometimes it's just a few people. It might be people that have never dealt with contracts or grants before, or that haven't worked with universities. Sometimes they have a lot of experience and other times they don't. And so we're here to help, in terms of help kind of keep the process moving and to offer our guidance. We can't do things for the company, though. We can't write their proposals for them. We're not checking their work for them. But we definitely can help to make sure that they're understanding what their obligations are in terms of what they're flowing down to us. And then the last thing to keep in mind is some companies are going to want or insist on things that we can't give them. And some of those things are ownership or making sure that we're not publishing or things like that. Those will be points of discussion, but there are things that some companies will want that we can't agree to. And so depending on the company's needs, sometimes we wouldn't be able to move forward with a contract or grant. Most of the time we can, though. And I would just say 99% of the time we can figure out a way to move forward. So long as we have the opportunity to work with the company and make sure that we're on the same page. So negotiating these agreements. So when the small business is awarded a grant, and then the university is awarded a sub-grant, specifically and especially under NSF, NIH, and others, there are standard terms and conditions. And so what we're primarily interested in is making sure that our statement of work is well defined. Our budget includes the proper rates and is within the amounts required by the company and what is also required by the federal agency. And then just to make sure that the terms and conditions, there's no exceptions or there's nothing that's changed or there's nothing that the small business is adding that's not necessary or not required. And then the last thing we're looking at is compliance, so making sure that any conflicts of interest are approved, if we're using animals or human subjects, any of our compliance issues have been approved and we're ready to move forward. Those typically can go much faster because the terms and conditions usually are fairly standard. Subcontracts under federal contracts, especially from defense agencies and also NASA and others, can have complicated terms and conditions. Here's some examples. Some of them have publication restrictions. There's actually clauses that are standard in some of these agreements for the small business that say that we cannot publish unless we get approval from the federal agency. That's not something that we can agree to. And so when we see that, or if we anticipate that, then we'll notify the small business at the proposal stage that we need to reserve the right to publish without restriction and without approval. And in order to do so, we may need the small business to go to the federal agency and get basically a determination that what we're doing is basic research and is widely publishable and is not restricted. And so that's why I keep mentioning we might need more time with these. It's because we often can see these and anticipate these issues by looking at a solicitation. Another one that can come up is citizenship restrictions. That's another thing that the university cannot agree to. We cannot discriminate on the basis of citizenship. And so therefore, if a research contract has a restriction on citizenship, that's going to be something that, that we'll need to go back to the federal agency and make sure that that is not applicable to the university. Controlled information, export issues, those things can also come up that we'll need to make sure that we resolve before being able to move forward. And that all ties into the fundamental research exemption. And basically what this is saying is that the university is performing basic fundamental research, basic and applied fundamental research that we publish, that we widely disseminate our research. We don't accept publication restrictions, and we don't accept restrictions that would make basically us keep the research results secret. I have a quick slide on conflicts of interest. I would say if you have questions, you can go directly to the Research Conflict of Interest office. But here's some requirements for all agencies, which is we always need a 700U. If that is positive, if you have a positive financial conflict of interest, then please go ahead and fill out the 700U addendum at the same time. Your research administrator can help you with those two forms. We want to make sure that we get those in and get that process started with our conflict of interest committee as soon as we know that this is going to be awarded. And so getting those forms in now will prevent delays later. The second thing, there's also agency-specific requirements. Here's some examples, but we know that there's more, and we are adding to the list as well of federal agencies that are adding conflict of interest requirements. So if you look at this, the webpage under the second bullet point, you can see what's required for each different agency for each phase of SBIRs and STTRs. And you will need to submit the forms or answer the questions in Phoebe based on the agency that you're submitting, that's the prime award funder. We need all of these forms completed at the proposal stage. Another piece that's important is you can't receive salary at both Berkeley and at the small business. You have to pick one or the other. So if you have approval to have the small business and you want to serve as PI and you're receiving salary, then you can do that through the small business. And you can also, or you can be PI at Berkeley and have salary through Berkeley, but you can't have salary at both. So it's something important to keep in mind. And then there's also a resource here for conflict of interest comparison chart, just for you to see. And this is between conflict of interest and conflict of commitment. So then we have research security and export control. So all PIs and all investigators must complete the research security training as required by that prime agency. So there's a link here for you to see when it's required. We need to see that at the proposal stage to make sure that before we submit that any required training has been completed. On the export control side, we also, if there are restrictions in the prime award, we'll need to make sure that we have a fundamental research exemption that has to come from the federal agency via a determination letter. It can't just come from the company. So basically what that means is if the company's accepted a restriction, let's say on publications, they must flow down all of those terms to the university. Even if it's not in our subcontract, that term applies unless we get a federal determination letter. So that determination letter will be from the federal agency saying, basically, this is the term that's in the agreement, but we're acknowledging that Berkeley is doing fundamental research and this publication restriction does not apply. So we would need to see that before we're able to move forward. Also, we encourage you to contact the Export Control Office here at Berkeley if you're anticipating any dual use outcomes, so civilian and military. So IPRA, we're here to help. The Industry Alliances Office, we're here to help you with your proposals, to answer any questions you have as you go through this process. And for IPRA, we're happy to meet with companies with you. So if a small business is interested in working with you and has questions, we can meet with you as well to be able to answer those questions. We can help to facilitate conversations with potential industry partners. That's both for SBIRs, STTRs, as well as any industry partners you're interested in working with. Oftentimes, a lot of what comes up is questions on how we manage intellectual property. So we're really happy to get on a call with you or just to answer via email if there's questions about our normal process of managing intellectual property. And then the last bullet point we talked about earlier, which is we occasionally get approached by small businesses looking to partner. So you, in addition to emailing us and giving us your name to put on a list, make sure your profile is up to date on the VCR expertise webpage as well. We often are pointing small businesses to that webpage to say, let us look around, let us know if you've identified a faculty member that you're interested in. And then if they do, then we will reach out to you first. They may reach out to you directly, but we would never connect you. I would never connect you with them until you've agreed to be connected. And if they reach out to you directly and you're not interested, I think that probably happens a lot for a faculty. You can tell them or not, depending on what you want. Okay, so we have some questions. What if the company has already filed their patents and UCB employees do not contribute to the conception of an idea? So if this is talking about a small business outside of the university, separate from the university, has already filed patents, and UC Berkeley employees are not contributing to the conception of the small business, then the university wouldn't have any ownership claim in that invention. Basically, how we would set up the subcontract is we would have language that talks about what an invention is, how we're defining it, what is owned by the university, what is owned by the small business, which is something that they solely create without any conception from the university, and then something that we create together, which is something where there is a named inventor from both the company and the university. And so the subcontracts will outline all of those things. But if a company already has intellectual property, we wouldn't claim any ownership over that, so long as we are not an inventor. And Lala, you can add to any of that if you would like. Okay, when do you think SBIR, STTR are going to open up again? On the website, it seems like they are all closed down. Is there a way to see when and which agencies will be having them this year? So that's a good question. I mean, these were just reauthorized on Monday, and so I think it's going to take time. I think a lot of our federal agencies are short-staffed, so it's going to take time to get these programs back up and running. I know that even the existing awardees that had active SBIRs and STTRs from before the lapse in authorization, it's taking a lot longer to even get award actions and things like that. So I think it's going to take some time to get it back up. I don't have a timeline myself, so I would just say keep going back and looking at the websites. and, you know, follow along. We do send out newsletters as well, so we'll be monitoring that as well. Okay, here is contact information. So my information is here, Lolly, our director of IP, and Andrea and Deborah as well. So we can open it up to more questions.
Kate, I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.